Clara Whitmore's hand trembled as she signed her name on the marriage certificate. Not from fear, but from rage she'd swallowed for 34 years. The mayor stood behind her, smiling like a man who'd just stolen cattle in broad daylight. Harlan Cross hadn't looked at her once during the vows. The whole town packed the courthouse steps, whispering about the old maid finally getting mercy from a man who wanted nothing to do with her. They thought this was charity. They thought she was desperate. They had no idea she'd spent the last 3 weeks reading every land deed in the county records office. By morning, Red Hollow would learn what happened when you underestimated a woman who'd stopped caring about their approval. Before we continue, if you believe everyone deserves dignity, no matter their age or what small-minded people say, subscribe to this channel and stay with me until the end of this story. And comment below what city you're watching from, so I can see how far Clara's story travels. The banker's wife had called her dried up at the general store 2 months ago. Clara had been reaching for flour when she heard it, not whispered, but said at full volume, meant to wound. The woman's daughter giggled. 3 other women turned to stare, waiting for Clara's reaction, like vultures circling something already dead. Clara had paid for her flour, walked out, and never let them see her hands shake. That was before the drought got worse, before desperation made powerful men do ugly things, before they decided her land was worth more than her humiliation. You understand what we're asking? Mayor Dalton's voice carried the false warmth of a snake oil salesman as he sat across from Clara in her small kitchen 3 weeks before the wedding. Clara's coffee had gone cold. She'd known they were coming. Half the town had been eyeing her property since her father died 18 months ago. The Whitmore farm, 30 acres of rocky soil that barely grew decent hay. Everyone thought she'd held on to it out of stubbornness or sentiment. They had no idea what it actually contained. You're asking me to marry a stranger, Clara said, her voice steady as bedrock. A man who doesn't want a wife. In exchange for what, exactly? Bank Chairman Wilson leaned forward, his belly pressing against her kitchen table. Security, Miss Whitmore. Your land merged with Cross Ranch means water rights for the whole county. Harlan Cross gets access to your creek. The town survives. You get... He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound as insulting as they were. A husband. A home. Protection. I have a home. For now. Wilson's smile didn't reach his eyes. But how long can a woman alone maintain a property? Taxes keep rising. The drought's not ending. Winter's coming. There it was, the threat wrapped in concern. Mayor Dalton pulled out a document. We've already spoken to Harlan. He's agreed, reluctantly, for the good of the county. We're not forcing anything, Miss Whitmore. We're offering you a way forward. Clara looked at the papers. The language was deliberately vague. Land consolidation for mutual benefit, and water rights cooperative management. Nothing about who would control what once the marriage was legal. Nothing about the freshwater spring that bubbled up on the northwest corner of her property. The spring her father had sworn her to secrecy about before he died. And if I refuse? Clara asked. Wilson's expression hardened. Then the bank might have to call in your father's outstanding loans. Debts you inherited. Debts that could force a sale. The kitchen felt smaller, colder. How long do I have to decide? 3 days, Dalton said. The county meeting is Friday. We need an answer by then. After they left, Clara sat alone in the gathering dusk. She didn't cry. She'd learned years ago that tears changed nothing. Instead, She walked to her father's old desk and pulled out the documents she'd been studying since the banker first started making noise about her property. Deeds, survey maps, water rights filings from 40 years ago. And the letter her father had written her before he died. "Clara, my girl, don't let them fool you. This land's worth more than they know. That spring feeds the whole valley underground. Whoever controls it controls everything. Be smarter than they think you are." Clara had spent 10 years in Chicago working for Amos Brennan, the toughest railroad land attorney in Illinois. She'd learned how to read contracts the way most women learn to read tea leaves. She'd seen men forge signatures, manipulate deeds, and steal land from widows and immigrants who didn't know the law. She knew exactly what Mayor Dalton and Chairman Wilson were planning. They thought marrying her off to Harlan Cross would give them legal cover to consolidate both properties, then sell the water rights to the corporate cattle syndicate that had been circling Red Hollow like buzzards for 2 years. They thought she was desperate enough, lonely enough, beaten down enough to agree without reading the fine print. They'd miscalculated badly. The wedding took place on a Tuesday morning because the mayor said Saturday was too festive for a practical arrangement. Clara wore her mother's cream-colored dress, faded but clean, the only nice thing she owned. She'd pinned her dark hair back severely, the way she always did. No flowers, no music, no pretense that this was anything but a transaction. The courthouse steps were packed. Harlan Cross arrived on horseback, 20 minutes late, wearing the same dusty black coat he wore to cattle auctions. He was 41, tall and raw-boned, with a scar running from his left eyebrow to his jaw. Souvenir from a range war 5 years back that left him widowed and harder than the Wyoming winter. He dismounted, tied his horse, and walked toward Clara without meeting her eyes. "We doing this?" His voice was gravel scraping stone. Clara nodded once. The circuit judge, a nervous man named Pettigrew, rushed through the vows like he was afraid someone would object. No one did. The crowd just watched, some with pity, most with gossip already forming on their tongues. "Do you, Harlan James Cross, take this woman?" "I do." "And do you, Clara May Whitmore?" "I do." Judge Pettigrew exhaled with visible relief. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you man and wife." He didn't say, "You may kiss the bride." Everyone knew this wasn't that kind of marriage. Harlan signed the certificate with a hard scratch of the pen. Clara signed below him, her handwriting precise and controlled. Mayor Dalton clapped Harlan on the shoulder. "For the good of the county, Cross, we won't forget this." Harlan's jaw tightened. He turned to Clara for the first time, really looking at her. His eyes were the color of winter sky, cold and unreadable. "Get your things," he said. "We leave in an hour." Then he walked away. Clara stood on the courthouse steps, listening to the whispers rising around her like smoke. Poor thing. At least she won't die alone. Harlan Cross never wanted another wife. This must be killing him. Martha Henshaw, the banker's wife, who'd called her dried up, smiled with false sweetness. "Well, Mrs. Cross, I suppose congratulations are in order, though I can't imagine what you'll do on that big ranch all alone while Harlan works." Clara met her eyes without flinching. "I imagine I'll be quite busy, Mrs. Henshaw." "Doing what, dear? Harlan's hands do all the work." "Reading," Clara said simply. "I've always enjoyed reading." The women laughed, soft, cruel laughter that said everything about what they thought of her. Clara let them laugh. In 63 days, not one of them would dare. Cross Ranch sprawled across 3,000 acres of high prairie and pine-covered ridges. The main house was solid but cheerless. 2 stories of weathered wood, with a wide porch and windows that looked out on endless sky. Harlan's ranch hands, 6 men ranging from barely 20 to weathered 50 stopped working when the wagon rolled up. They stared at Clara like she was a curiosity, something unexpected and slightly ridiculous. "Boys, this is my wife." Harlan's voice carried no warmth, just flat statement of fact. "She'll be staying in the house. You treat her respectful, or you're done here." He didn't wait for acknowledgement, just unhitched the wagon and walked toward the barn. One of the younger hands, a red-headed kid with freckles, grinned. "Ma'am, you need help with your trunk?" "I can manage," Clara said. "It's mighty heavy for—" "I said I can manage." She lifted the trunk herself, not easily, but she managed, and carried it into the house while the men watched with a mixture of surprise and amusement. Inside, the house smelled like leather, wood smoke, and years of male solitude. The furniture was functional, the kitchen clean but stark. No curtains, no softness anywhere. Harlan's voice came from behind her. "You'll have the room upstairs on the left. I'm across the hall. You need anything, ask Sam. He's the foreman. Meals are at 6 in the morning, noon, and 6 at night. Don't expect me to talk much." Clara turned to face him. "I don't expect anything, Mr. Cross." Something flickered in his expression, maybe surprise that she wasn't crying or pleading for kindness. "It's Harlan. We're married. Might as well use names." "Harlan," she repeated. "And I'm Clara." "I know what your name is." He moved to leave, then stopped. "This wasn't my idea. You understand that?" "I understand you agreed to it." "For the water rights. For the county. Not for—" He gestured vaguely between them. "Not for this." "Neither did I," Clara said quietly. Harlan studied her for a long moment. "Then I guess we understand each other." After he left, Clara climbed the stairs to her room. It was bare except for a bed, a washstand, and a single window overlooking the eastern pastures. She unpacked her trunk methodically, dresses, undergarments, books, and at the very bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, her father's documents and her own notebooks filled with careful observations about Red Hollow's land dealings. That night, she ate dinner in the bunkhouse with the ranch hands. They made awkward conversation, unsure how to treat the boss's wife, who clearly wasn't loved and probably wasn't wanted. Sam, the foreman, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a beard gone gray, pulled her aside after. "Ma'am, I don't know what arrangement you and Harlan have, but you should know he's a fair man. Hard, but fair. He won't mistreat you." "I don't fear mistreatment, Sam. What do you fear?" Clara looked out at the darkening prairie. "Nothing anymore." The first week, Clara barely saw Harlan. He rose before dawn, worked until sunset, ate in silence, and disappeared to his room. The hand stopped staring after 3 days. She became part of the landscape, present but unremarkable, which suited Clara perfectly. While Harlan worked the cattle and the men mended fences, Clara walked the property. She studied the land with the eye of someone trained to see what others missed. She noted elevation changes, water flow patterns, the way the grass grew thicker in certain areas. And she spent every evening in the ranch office, a small room off the main hall where Harlan kept his accounts and land documents. On the 8th day, Sam found her there at midnight, surrounded by maps and deeds. "Mrs. Cross, you should rest." Clara looked up, her eyes tired but sharp. "Sam, how long has Harlan owned this ranch?" "His father bought it 32 years ago. Harlan inherited when he was 19. "And the water rights?" Sam frowned. "What about them? Who filed them? When? Under what terms?" I don't rightly know, ma'am. Why?" Clara held up a document dated 1883. Because this filing gives Cross Ranch access to surface water from Blackstone Creek. But my lad, the Whitmore property, contains the primary spring that feeds that creek, which means you control the source, Sam finished, understanding dawning. Exactly. And once our properties merged legally through marriage, that spring's water rights should have transferred to mutual control. But look at this. She showed him another document. This is the consolidation agreement the mayor had Harlan sign. It's deliberately vague about water rights administration. And this clause here, she pointed to fine print. This clause allows for third-party water management contracts in the event of resource scarcity. That's legal language for selling access to outside corporations. Sam's expression darkened. Dalton and Wilson are planning to sell the water rights? Not just sell, control. Once they have legal authority over consolidated properties, they can negotiate contracts with the cattle syndicate. Harlan gets pushed out. I get pushed out. The syndicate gets permanent water access. Dalton and Wilson get rich. And Red Hollow gets nothing but empty promises. Does Harlan know? I don't think Harlan read the document carefully. He was focused on surviving the drought and saving the county. He trusted the mayor. That was foolish. Clara's smile was thin and hard. Men often are when they assume everyone shares their integrity. Sam sat down heavily. What are you going to do? What I'm trained to do, Sam. Read the law, find the leverage, and make sure the men who thought they could use me learn exactly who they're dealing with. On Sunday, 2 weeks after the wedding, Clara rode into Red Hollow alone. She wore deep navy instead of her usual beige, a deliberate choice that made her stand out against the dusty street. She tied her horse outside the courthouse and walked directly to the county recorder's office. The clerk, a nervous man named Perkins, looked up in surprise. Mrs. Cross, is there something? I need to file a legal document, Mr. Perkins. She placed papers on his desk. This is an injunction blocking any property consolidation or transfer involving the Whitmore Farm and Cross Ranch, pending full legal review of all water rights contracts. I'm filing under my own name, Clara Whitmore Cross, as the legal owner of the Whitmore property. Perkins went pale. Mrs. Cross, this is highly irregular. The mayor and chairman are not my legal guardians or representatives. I'm a married woman with full property rights under territorial law. You'll file this immediately, or I'll file a complaint with the territorial court about obstruction of legal process. Her voice was calm, professional, utterly unmovable. Perkins filed the papers with shaking hands. By noon, word had spread through Red Hollow like wildfire. By 2 o'clock, Mayor Dalton and Chairman Wilson arrived at the courthouse, faces red with fury. Clara was waiting on the steps. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Wilson shouted, abandoning all pretense of civility. Clara didn't flinch. "Protecting my property rights, Chairman Wilson. Something you should understand given your profession." Dalton's voice was low and dangerous. "You're making a mistake, Mrs. Cross. A very serious mistake." "Am I?" "Because according to territorial law, property consolidation requires mutual consent and clear documentation of resource allocation. Your agreement contains neither. It's deliberately vague to allow for exploitation." "That's nonsense." "Then you won't mind a territorial judge reviewing it?" A crowd was gathering. The Sunday market shoppers, ranch families, townspeople, all watching the old maid face down the two most powerful men in the county. Wilson stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You're Harlan's wife now. You have no independent claim." Clara pulled out another document. Actually, under the Married Women's Property Act of 1870, a woman retains ownership of property she brought into the marriage. My father's land is mine, not Harlan's, not yours. And until I see legal documentation proving this consolidation benefits both parties equally, it's frozen." Harlan agreed to terms he didn't fully understand, terms you deliberately obscured. Dalton's face went from red to purple. "You're accusing us of fraud?" "I'm stating facts, Mayor. If you'd like to dispute them, I suggest you hire an attorney. I spent 10 years working for one. I know exactly how this game is played." The crowd was silent now, leaning in. Clara held up one more paper, the one that would detonate everything. "This," she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "is a draft agreement between the Red Hollow County Administration and the Midwest Cattle Syndicate. It bears a signature that appears to be Harlan Cross's, except Harlan never signed it. I checked his signature against the marriage certificate. It's forged." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Wilson lunged forward, but Sam, who'd followed Clara into town, stepped between them. "I'd think carefully about your next move, Chairman," Sam said quietly. Clara's voice remained steady. "You plan to merge our properties, forge Harlan's consent, sell water rights to the syndicate, and pocket the fees. You thought I was desperate enough and stupid enough to never question it." She looked directly at Mayor Dalton. "You thought wrong." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Martha Henshaw's voice cut through, shrill with disbelief. "She's lying! She's just a bitter spinster trying to cause trouble." Clara turned to face her. "Mrs. Henshaw, your husband's bank holds the promissory note on this fraud scheme. If I were you, I'd start asking questions about where he's been keeping his second set of account books." Martha's face went white. Clara descended the courthouse steps, leaving chaos in her wake. Men shouting, women whispering, Mayor Dalton and Chairman Wilson trapped by their own corruption, exposed in front of the entire county. She untied her horse and rode back to Cross Ranch, her spine straight and her heart hammering. She'd just declared war on the most powerful men in Red Hollow, and she'd done it alone. When she reached the ranch at sunset, Harlan was waiting on the porch. His expression was unreadable, somewhere between fury and something that might have been respect. "You want to tell me," he said slowly, "why half the county is talking about my wife calling the mayor a criminal?" Clara dismounted. "Because he is one, and he tried to steal your ranch." She pulled the forged document from her saddlebag and handed it to him. Harlan read it in the fading light. His jaw clenched tighter with every line. When he finished, he looked at Clara like he was seeing her for the first time. "How long have you known?" "Since before the wedding." "And you married me anyway?" "I married you because they gave me no choice," Clara said. "But I'm fighting them because I choose to." Harlan was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something Clara hadn't expected. He smiled. A small, grim smile that transformed his scarred face. "Clara Whitmore Cross," he said. "I think this county has no idea what they've done." "Neither did I," Clara admitted. "But we're going to show them." For the first time since they'd spoken vows, Harlan extended his hand. Clara took it, and Red Hollow's reckoning began. That night, neither of them slept. Harlan sat at the kitchen table cleaning his rifle, while Clara spread documents across every available surface. The lamp burned low between them, casting shadows that made the room feel smaller than it was. "They'll come after you," Harlan said, without looking up from the gun barrel. "Dalton's not the type to take public humiliation quietly." "I know." "You understand what that means? In a county where he controls the law?" Clara's pen didn't stop moving across her notepad. "I've counted 3 legal violations in their consolidation scheme. 4 if we include the forged signature. 5 if we examine how they pressured you into this marriage in the first place. That doesn't answer my question. She finally looked up. I know exactly what it means, Harlan. I'm choosing to do it anyway. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite approval, but close. You're either the bravest woman I've met, or the most foolish. Maybe both. He almost smiled. Why didn't you tell me before the wedding? About the fraud? Would you have believed me? Harlan considered this. Probably not. Exactly. You needed to see it yourself. Read it in their own handwriting. Clara set down her pen. And I needed to be your legal wife before I could act. As an unmarried woman, my property claims would have been challenged immediately. As Mrs. Cross, I have standing. You used me. We used each other. You needed water rights. I needed legal protection. The difference is, I understood the full game being played. Harlan's jaw tightened. I don't like being played. Then you should have read the contract more carefully. The silence stretched between them, not hostile, but testing. Two people who'd been strangers 3 weeks ago, now bound together by law and necessity, trying to figure out if they could trust each other. Finally, Harlan stood. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be ugly. Where are you going? To set watches. If Dalton's smart, he'll try something tonight while we're vulnerable. Clara rose too. Then I'll help. You don't know how to. I can shoot, Harlan. My father taught me when I was 12. I can ride, rope, and hold a watch better than half your hands. Don't make assumptions about what I can't do. Harlan studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled a revolver from his desk drawer and checked the cylinder before handing it to her. You know how to use this? Clara took the gun with steady hands. Yes. Then you'll take the east window upstairs. Sam's got the barn. I'll cover the front approach. He paused at the door. And Clara, if someone comes through that window, you shoot first. Questions come later. Understood. But no one came that night. The attack came at dawn, and it wasn't physical. Sam burst through the kitchen door just as Clara was making coffee. Boss, we got trouble. Big trouble. Harlan was already reaching for his gun belt. How many? Not that kind of trouble. It's the hands. 4 of them just quit, packed their gear, and rode out. Clara's stomach dropped. Which ones? Miller, Davidson, young Tommy, and Beck. They said... Sam stopped, looking uncomfortable. Said what? Harlan's voice was dangerously quiet. Said they won't work for a ranch that's about to be seized for fraud. Said Dalton told them last night you and the missus would be arrested by week's end for forgery and theft of county resources. Harlan slammed his fist on the table. That lying son of a... There's more, Sam interrupted. I rode into town early for supplies. Jenkins at the general store won't extend credit anymore. Said the bank instructed him to close your account. Same with the feed store and the smithy. Clara felt ice settle in her chest. They're trying to starve us out. It's working, Sam said grimly. We got maybe 3 weeks of supplies. Winter's 6 weeks out. We lose our credit. We can't buy feed for the stock. Can't buy ammunition. Can't hire replacement hands. Harlan's face had gone hard as stone. How many men we got left? You, me, Peterson, and old Dutch. 4 men to work 3,000 acres. The numbers were impossible. Clara knew ranching well enough to understand that. 4 men couldn't maintain fences, tend cattle, prepare for winter, and defend the property if things got violent. We need to fight back legally, Clara said. File countercharges. Get the territorial marshal involved. The nearest marshal is 3 days' ride, Harlan said. And by the time he investigates, we'll be bankrupt and our cattle scattered. Then we go to the territorial governor, bypass Dalton entirely. Sam shook his head. Governor's appointed, ma'am. Dalton's got connections in Cheyenne. He'll block any petition we send. Clara's mind raced through options, discarding each one as quickly as it formed. They were being squeezed from every direction, financially, legally, socially. Dalton had learned from her courthouse ambush. He wasn't going to fight her in public again. He was going to destroy them quietly, systematically, until they had no choice but to surrender the land. There's one thing we can do, she said slowly. Something Dalton can't block or control. Both men looked at her. We go public, not just locally. We send the story to every newspaper between here and Denver. Make this a scandal too big for the territorial government to ignore. Harlan frowned. You think some city newspaper is going to care about a county land dispute? I think they'll care about corruption, forged documents, and a conspiracy to defraud homesteaders, especially when it involves forcing a woman into marriage as part of the scheme. Clara met his eyes. The press loves stories about powerful men abusing innocent victims. We give them that story, complete with documentation, and Dalton's political protection evaporates. You're talking about making this personal, Sam said. Putting yourself in every paper from here to the Missouri River. I'm already in this, Sam. Might as well use it. Harlan was quiet for a long moment. You understand what you're doing. Once this story spreads, you won't just be the old maid they gossiped about. You'll be famous. Or infamous. Every detail of your life, picked apart by strangers. Better that than watching Dalton steal everything while pretending to be respectable. All right. Harlan's decision came swift and final. We do it your way, but we do it fast, before he can react. Clara was already moving toward the office. I'll write the article. You need to sign affidavits verifying the forged signature. What about proof? The newspapers will want evidence. I've got copies of everything. Contracts, deeds, the forged agreement. I've been documenting this since before the wedding. Sam let out a low whistle. Ma'am, you've been planning this for weeks. Longer, Clara admitted, since the day my father died and the vultures started circling. I just didn't know how bad it would get. Over the next 4 hours, they worked with focused intensity. Clara drafted a detailed account of the conspiracy, naming names and citing specific documents. Harlan provided sworn testimony about the pressure tactics used to force the marriage. Sam added his observations about the timeline and the suspicious meetings between Dalton, Wilson, and the cattle syndicate representatives. By noon, they had a package ready for 3 different newspapers: the Denver Post, the Cheyenne Leader, and the Salt Lake Tribune. I'll ride to Laramie, Sam said. Telegraph station there can send the story today. Take Peterson with you, Harlan ordered. I don't trust Dalton not to try something on the road. After they left, the ranch felt eerily quiet. Just Harlan, Clara, and Old Dutch, a man in his 60s who'd worked cattle since before the Civil War and wouldn't leave even if the ranch was burning. Clara returned to the office to catalog more documents when she heard horses approaching. Multiple riders, moving fast. Harlan was at the window instantly. 6 men. Dalton's leading them. Clara's pulse quickened. Is it legal? Depends. If he's got a warrant, we have to let them in. And if he doesn't? Harlan checked his rifle. Then it's trespassing. The riders stopped 50 yards from the house. Mayor Dalton sat his horse with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. Beside him, Chairman Wilson looked nervous. The other 4 were hired muscle, men Clara didn't recognize. Cross! Dalton's voice carried across the yard. "We need to talk." Harlan stepped onto the porch, rifle held casually but ready. "You're on my property uninvited, Dalton. That's all the conversation we need." "Don't be difficult. We're here to resolve this misunderstanding peacefully." "There's no misunderstanding. You tried to defraud me. My wife exposed it. Now you're trying to bankrupt me into submission. I'd say I understand perfectly." Wilson spoke up, his voice shaking slightly. "Mrs. Cross made serious accusations yesterday. Accusations that damage reputations. If she retracts them publicly and agrees to the original consolidation terms, we're willing to forget this unfortunate incident." Clara appeared in the doorway. "No." Dalton's eyes narrowed. "You should reconsider, Mrs. Cross. Your husband's ranch is about to face some very serious financial difficulties. Suppliers refusing service, hands quitting, winter coming. It would be a shame if you lost everything because of your pride." "Is that a threat, Mayor?" "It's reality. A woman's stubbornness can ruin a man's livelihood. Harlan married you to save the county. Are you really going to destroy him out of spite?" The manipulation was expertly done, making Clara the villain, the ungrateful wife, bringing ruin on her husband. It might have worked on someone who cared what these men thought. "My wife's not the problem here," Harlan said, his voice cold as January wind. "You are. And you just confirmed everything she accused you of by showing up here with threats and hired guns." One of the muscle men shifted uncomfortably. He clearly hadn't expected to be called out so directly. Dalton's face reddened. "Cross, be reasonable." "Get off my land. We're trying to help. Now." Harlan raised the rifle slightly. "Before I stop being polite." For a moment, Clara thought Dalton might actually try something. His hand moved toward his coat. The hired men tensed. Then Dutch appeared from the barn with a shotgun, taking position where he had a clear field of fire. Dalton's hand stopped. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "This isn't over, Cross. You're making enemies you can't afford." "I've had enemies before. They didn't end well." The threat hung in the air, a reference to the range war that had left Harlan scarred and widowed, but still standing. Dalton wheeled his horse. "You've got 1 week to reconsider. After that, the consequences are on you." They rode out, leaving dust and implied violence in their wake. Clara's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her skirt, trying to steady herself. Harlan noticed. "You all right?" "No, but I will be." "That was brave, what you did. Stupid, but brave." "I'm tired of being afraid of men like him. Tired of staying quiet while they take what they want." Harlan looked at her with something that might have been respect. "You really worked for a railroad attorney in Chicago?" "For 10 years. I learned how to fight from the best." "Why'd you come back?" Clara hesitated. The truth felt too personal, too raw. But Harlan had put his ranch on the line for her accusations. He deserved honesty. "My father got sick, consumption. He wrote asking me to come home. By the time I got here, he had 3 months left." She paused. "He spent those months teaching me everything about the land, the spring, the water rights, the way Red Hollow worked. He knew what would happen after he died. He was preparing me to fight." "Sounds like a good man." "He was, and they killed him." Harlan's eyebrows rose. "What?" "Not directly, but the stress, the pressure from the bank, the threats about the land, it made him sicker. He couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe. The doctor said his heart just gave out. But I know better." Clara's voice hardened. "Wilson kept pushing for payments my father couldn't make. Dalton kept hinting about forced sales. They wanted him to die, so they could take the land without resistance. And instead, they got you. Instead, they got me. The sun was setting, painting the prairie in shades of amber and blood. Clara watched the horizon, thinking about her father, about all the quiet people who'd been bullied and cheated by men with power and no conscience. "Harlan?" she said quietly. "Yeah?" "Thank you for standing with me today." He was silent for a moment. "You're my wife. That makes you my partner. And partners don't abandon each other when things get hard." It wasn't romance. It wasn't even friendship yet. But it was something solid, something Clara could build on. That night, Sam returned from Laramie with news that made Clara's heart race. "It's done," he said, dropping into a chair with exhaustion. "Telegraphed all 3 papers. The Denver Post wants to send a reporter. Said this could be a major story if it's half as corrupt as we claim." "When?" Harlan asked. 3 days, maybe 4. Clara calculated quickly. "Dalton gave us 1 week. That means he's planning something before the reporter arrives." "What can he do?" Sam asked. "If he moves against us now, it proves everything we're saying." "He doesn't need to move directly," Clara said. "He just needs to make us look unstable. Create incidents that make our accusations seem like desperate lies from failing ranchers." Harlan understood immediately. "He'll sabotage us. Make it look like we're incompetent or dangerous." "Exactly. Then when the reporter arrives, Dalton presents himself as the reasonable authority dealing with troublemakers." "So what do we do?" Clara smiled grimly. "We document everything. Every supplier who refuses us. Every threat. Every suspicious incident. We create a record so detailed that no reporter can ignore it." Over the next 3 days, Red Hollow showed its true nature. The general store refused Clara entry. The church ladies turned their backs when she walked past. Children threw rocks at the ranch wagon. Someone cut their fence line, letting 30 head of cattle onto the public road. But Clara recorded it all. Names, dates, witnesses. She wrote everything down with the precision of a legal clerk building a case. And Harlan stopped trying to spare her from the ugly reality. He let her see how brutal small-town power could be when it turned against you. Let her face the hatred head on. On the 4th day, the reporter arrived. His name was James Hartwell, and he wore city clothes that made him stand out like a crow in a chicken coop. He was maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a notebook that never closed. Dalton tried to intercept him at the hotel, offering the official version of events. Hartwell listened politely, then rode out to Cross Ranch. Clara met him on the porch with 3 boxes of documentation. "Mrs. Cross?" "Mr. Hartwell, thank you for coming." "I have to be honest, ma'am. I've heard 2 very different versions of this story. Mayor Dalton says you're a disturbed woman making false accusations. Your telegram says this is systematic fraud." "Which is it?" Clara handed him the first box. "Read the documents, then decide for yourself." Hartwell spent 6 hours at the ranch. He read every contract, every deed, every notation Clara had made. He interviewed Harlan about the marriage pressure. He examined the forged signature under lamplight. When he finally looked up, his expression was grave. "This is bigger than I thought," he said quietly. "This isn't just land fraud. This is conspiracy involving territorial officials. If half of this is true—" "It's all true," Clara interrupted. "Every word." "Then you've just handed me the story of the year." Hartwell closed his notebook. "But Mrs. Cross, you need to understand something. Once I publish this, there's no going back. These men will destroy you if they can. Are you prepared for that?" Clara thought about her father. About 10 years of watching powerful men steal from the powerless. About 34 years of being dismissed and underestimated. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, "I've been preparing for this my entire life." The reporter left at dawn, riding hard for Denver. 3 days later, the story broke across the front page of the Denver Post with a headline that made Clara's hands shake. Wyoming town leaders accused of marriage fraud and land theft. Woman forced to wed to facilitate corruption scheme. By sunset, every newspaper in 3 territories had picked up the story. And Red Hollow's reckoning accelerated into something nobody could stop. The telegraph operator's hands shook when he delivered the messages. 17 telegrams arrived at Cross Ranch within 4 hours of the Denver Post story breaking. Newspapers from San Francisco to St. Louis requesting interviews. A lawyer from Cheyenne offering representation. The territorial governor's office demanding a full report. And one from the Midwest Cattle Syndicate's legal department threatening a libel suit. Clara read them aloud while Harlan paced the kitchen like a caged wolf. "They're threatening to sue us for damages," she said, holding up the syndicate's telegram. $50,000 for defamation of character. Can they do that? They can try, but they'd have to prove the allegations are false, which means opening their books to court examination. Clara set the telegram aside. It's a bluff. They're hoping we'll panic and retract the story. What about the governor? He wants documentation within 3 days, probably covering himself politically before this explodes further. Sam burst through the door without knocking. "Boss, you need to see this, now!" They followed him outside, where Dutch was unhitching a wagon. In the bed lay Clara's belongings, dresses, books, her father's desk, dumped in a tangled heap. "What the hell?" Harlan's voice was dangerously quiet. "Found it at the property line," Dutch said. "Someone broke into the old Whitmore house last night, ransacked the place, left this." A note was pinned to Clara's mother's quilt. "Go back where you came from." Clara's throat tightened. The Whitmore house was where she'd grown up, where her father had died, where every memory of her life before this nightmare lived. And they'd violated it. "I'll kill them," Harlan said flatly. "No." Clara's voice was steady, despite the rage burning in her chest. "That's what they want. Violence they can use against us. They destroyed your home. They destroyed a building. My home is here now." She met his eyes. "And I'm not running." But the message was clear. Dalton wasn't backing down. The newspaper story had wounded him, but wounded animals were most dangerous. That afternoon, Sheriff Porter arrived with a warrant. He stood on the porch, looking uncomfortable, his badge catching the late sun. "I'm sorry about this, Cross, but I got orders." Harlan's hand moved toward his gun. "Orders from who?" "Judge Blackwell signed it this morning. Says there's probable cause to search the premises for stolen county documents." "That's horseshit and you know it," Sam said. Porter's jaw tightened. "Maybe, but it's legal horseshit. You gonna let me do my job, or we gonna have a problem?" Clara stepped forward. "Sheriff, those documents are copies of public records, legally obtained from the county office. You're welcome to search, but you won't find anything stolen." "Ma'am, I hope you're right." Porter looked genuinely pained. "But Judge Blackwell's been hearing things. Says you might have forged some of those papers to make the mayor look bad." The accusation hit like a physical blow. They were trying to flip the narrative, make Clara the forger, the liar, the troublemaker. "That's absurd," she said. "I have witnesses who saw me obtain those documents." "Do you? Because Perkins, the county clerk, says he don't remember you ever requesting files. Says you must have stolen them after hours." Clara's stomach dropped. Perkins had been nervous when she filed the injunction, but she'd assumed he was just conflict-averse. Now she understood. Dalton had gotten to him. Probably threatened his job, or worse. "Sheriff Porter," Harlan said carefully, "you really want to be part of this? Helping Dalton cover up fraud?" "I'm doing my job, Cross. Same as always." But his eyes said something different. They said he knew this was wrong, but couldn't stop it. The search took 2 hours. Porter's deputies, 3 young men who avoided eye contact, went through every room, every drawer, every shelf. They were thorough, but not destructive, which Clara supposed was something. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. Every document Clara possessed was legally obtained or legally copied. But when Porter left, he took her entire file of evidence with him. "Judge's orders," he said quietly. "Evidence in a potential forgery case. It'll be held pending investigation."
"That's everything," Clara said, her voice breaking despite her best efforts. "Every contract, every deed, every proof we have."
"You'll get it back if you're cleared."
"And if we're not?"
Porter didn't answer. He just rode away with 3 months of Clara's work packed in saddlebags. Harlan slammed his fist into the porch post. "They're burying us, taking our proof, our credibility, everything." "They can't bury what's already published," Clara said. "Hartwell has copies of everything. The newspaper has the story. Dalton can seize our documents, but he can't unring that bell. He can make people doubt it, say you're a liar, a forger, a desperate woman making up stories." Harlan's frustration was palpable. "And without proof to show investigators, how do we fight back?" Clara's mind raced. He was right. The newspaper story had bought them attention, but attention without evidence would evaporate. Dalton was gambling that by the time territorial investigators arrived, the narrative would be so muddied that nothing could be proven. "I kept copies," she said suddenly. Both Harlan and Sam stared at her. "What?" "I kept copies. Hidden. I didn't trust that something like this wouldn't happen." Clara was already moving toward the barn. "After Chicago, I learned never to keep all your evidence in one place." She led them to the back of the grain storage, where she'd hollowed out a space behind loose boards. Inside was a waterproof pouch containing duplicates of every critical document. Harlan let out a breath he'd been holding. "You really did work for a railroad attorney." Amos Brennan used to say, "Trust in God, but keep 3 copies of everything important." Clara clutched the pouch. "These stay hidden. If they come back with another warrant, they find nothing." "And the territorial investigators?" "We give them enough to verify our claims, without revealing we have complete duplicates. Make Dalton think we're vulnerable when we're not." It was the kind of strategic thinking that came from years of legal training, and watching it unfold, Harlan realized his wife was far more dangerous than Dalton had calculated. That night, Red Hollow showed its true colors. Someone set fire to the southern fence line. The blaze raced through dry grass, threatening to jump to the pine forest beyond. It took all 4 of them working frantically to contain it, beating flames with wet blankets until their lungs burned with smoke. When dawn came gray and exhausted, they found a second message carved into the barn door. "Leave or burn." Clara stared at the words, soot-streaked and shaking from exhaustion. "They're escalating." "I'm getting you out of here," Harlan said. "This is too dangerous." "No." "Clara, they just tried to burn us out." "Next time they'll find me still here." Her voice was raw but firm. "I'm not leaving, Harlan. This is my fight too. It's not worth your life." "Yes, it is." She turned to face him. "Every woman who's been told to be quiet, to accept less, to let men make decisions for her. I'm fighting for them too. If I run now, I'm telling every girl in this county that power wins and courage doesn't matter." Harlan wanted to argue, but looking at Clara's face, exhausted, soot-covered, absolutely immovable, he knew it would be pointless. "Then we fight smarter," he said finally. "We set watches around the clock. We sleep in shifts, and we get word to the territorial marshal about the arson. Dalton will say we set it ourselves for sympathy. Probably. But we document it anyway. Add it to the pile." The next blow came from an unexpected direction. 2 days after the fire, a woman arrived at the ranch in a hired wagon. She was maybe 60, dressed in severe black, with eyes like flint. "I'm looking for Clara Whitmore Cross," she announced. Clara emerged from the house, immediately wary. "I'm Clara." The woman's gaze swept over her with open disapproval. "I am Mrs. Edith Carmichael from the Denver Ladies' Temperance and Moral Reform Society. We've read the newspaper accounts of your situation." Clara's heart sank. She knew what was coming. "We are prepared to offer you assistance," Mrs. Carmichael continued, "provided you agree to certain conditions." "What conditions?" "First, you must leave this ranch immediately and return to proper society. Living alone with a man who is forced to marry you is highly inappropriate and damages your moral standing." Clara's jaw tightened. "He's my husband. In name only, according to the newspaper accounts. A marriage without affection or choice is hardly a marriage at all." Mrs. Carmichael's voice dripped with false sympathy. "We can arrange respectable housing in Denver, help you obtain an annulment, and find suitable employment." "No. Miss Whitmore, please be reasonable. It's Mrs. Cross, and I'm staying exactly where I am." Mrs. Carmichael's expression hardened. "Then you're refusing our help?" "I'm refusing to be rescued from a situation I'm choosing to stay in." Clara stepped closer. "I understand you think you're helping, but I don't need saving. I need people to listen when I say powerful men are stealing land and breaking laws." "That's not a proper concern for a lady." "Then I guess I'm not a proper lady." After Mrs. Carmichael left in a huff, Clara found Harlem in the barn, shoeing a horse. "Heard voices," he said without looking up. "Reformers from Denver wanted to save me from you." That got his attention. "What'd you tell them?" "That I didn't need saving." Clara leaned against the stall. "They think I'm a victim. Poor, desperate spinster trapped in a loveless marriage." "Aren't you?" The question hung between them, honest and harder than it should have been. "I don't know," Clara admitted. "This isn't what I imagined marriage would be. But it's not a trap either. It's just complicated." Harlan set down the horse's hoof and straightened. "You could go with them, get free of this mess. Start over somewhere nobody knows your name." "Is that what you want?" "What I want doesn't matter. This is your choice." Clara studied him, this hard, scarred man who'd stood beside her when he could have abandoned her, who'd believed her accusations when everyone else called her a liar, who'd put his ranch on the line for principles he could have ignored. "I'm staying," she said quietly. "Not because I have to, because I want to." Something shifted in Harlan's expression. Relief, maybe, or respect. "Then we better get ready. The territorial investigator arrives tomorrow." Augustus Thorne was nothing like Clara expected. He was 38, educated back east, with the kind of sharp intelligence that missed nothing. He arrived with 2 clerks and enough legal authority to make even Dalton nervous. The first meeting happened in the courthouse, with half the town watching. Dalton presented himself as the wronged party, reasonable, concerned, just trying to save the county from false accusations. "Mr. Thorne, this entire situation stems from a disturbed woman's inability to accept her circumstances," he said smoothly. "Mrs. Cross is clearly suffering from some form of hysteria." "I'm not hysterical," Clara interrupted. "I'm methodical." Thorne's eyebrows rose slightly. "Mrs. Cross, perhaps you could present evidence?" "Gladly." She pulled out documents from the hidden cache. "This is Mayor Dalton's original consolidation proposal. Note the vague language around water rights administration. This is Chairman Wilson's correspondence with the Midwest Cattle Syndicate
discussing water access fees.
And this is the forged signature allegedly from my husband. She laid them out with practiced precision. Thorne examined each one carefully. When he compared the forged signature to Harlan's real one, his expression tightened. Mayor Dalton, can you explain this discrepancy? Dalton's face reddened. That document is clearly a forgery, created by Mrs. Cross herself to what? Frame you? Thorne's voice was dry. That would require her to have access to syndicate letterhead, knowledge of their legal counsel's name, and the ability to forge multiple handwriting samples, all before she supposedly went mad with hysteria. Wilson jumped in. She worked for a lawyer in Chicago. She has the skills to document fraud, yes, Thorne said, which appears to be exactly what she's done. He turned to Clara. Mrs. Cross, I'll need to interview you separately, along with your husband and any witnesses to the events in question. The interviews took 3 days. Clara recounted everything: the forced marriage, the pressure tactics, her discovery of the fraud scheme. She showed him her notebooks, her timeline, her careful documentation. Harlan testified about the drought, the threats, the way he'd been manipulated into agreeing to the marriage without understanding the full consolidation terms. Sam described the suspicious meetings, the hired guns, the attempts to drive them out. And slowly, methodically, Augustus Thorne built a case that made Dalton's explanations look increasingly desperate. On the 4th day, Thorne called everyone back to the courthouse. The room was packed. Every rancher, every shopkeeper, every gossip in 3 counties wanted to see how this ended. Thorne stood at the front, his expression grave. After reviewing all available evidence and testimony, I am making the following determinations. His voice carried to every corner. First, the consolidation agreement presented to Mr. Cross was deliberately misleading regarding water rights administration. Second, the signature on the syndicate agreement is demonstrably forged. Third, there is sufficient evidence of conspiracy to defraud to warrant criminal investigation. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Dalton shot to his feet. This is outrageous. You're taking the word of a woman who documented everything with remarkable precision, Thorne interrupted. Mayor Dalton, I am recommending to the territorial governor that you be suspended from office pending full investigation. Chairman Wilson, the same applies to your position at the bank. Wilson went pale. You can't. I can, and I am. Furthermore, I am invalidating the current consolidation agreement and restoring independent control of both the Cross Ranch and Whitmore properties to their respective owners. Clara felt her knees go weak. She'd won. After months of fear and fighting, she'd actually won. But Thorne wasn't finished. However, he continued, there remains the matter of the county's water crisis. The drought hasn't ended. Red Hollow still needs a sustainable water management solution. He looked directly at Clara. Mrs. Cross, you control the primary freshwater spring in this valley. What do you propose? Every eye in the room turned to her. This was it. The moment she'd been preparing for. Not revenge, not victory, but the chance to actually fix what was broken. Clara stood, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I propose a cooperative water agreement. No single entity controls the spring. Instead, we create a county water authority with representatives from every ranch and farm. Access is guaranteed by documented right, not political favor. Fees are transparent and used for maintenance only, not profit. Silence filled the courthouse. Then a rancher from the back spoke up. That'd be fair to everyone? That's the point, Clara said. Fair to everyone, not just the powerful. Another voice. And you'd give up exclusive control? I never wanted control. I wanted to prevent it from being stolen and sold to the highest bidder. Thorne nodded slowly. An interesting proposal. It would require a legal framework and oversight. I can draft it, Clara offered, with proper review by territorial authorities to ensure it's equitable. Dalton's voice dripped with poison. And we're supposed to trust the woman who's been lying about us for months? Clara turned to face him directly. No, Mayor Dalton. You're supposed to trust the law. The same law you tried to manipulate and break. She paused. And for the record, I never lied. I just stopped letting you get away with yours. The courtroom erupted. Some people cheered. Others shouted denials. Dalton stormed out with Wilson scrambling after him. But through the chaos, Clara felt something shift. The balance of power in Red Hollow had fundamentally changed. And the woman they'd called an old maid, useless and desperate, had been the one to change it. Thorne gavelled for order. This hearing is adjourned, pending full territorial review. All parties will be notified of next steps. As people filed out, some ranchers approached Clara with grudging respect. Others avoided her eyes. But nobody mocked her. Nobody dismissed her. That night, back at the ranch, Clara and Harlan sat on the porch, watching stars appear over the prairie. You did it, he said quietly. We did it. No. Harlan turned to look at her. That was all you. The planning, the courage, the fight. I just stood where you told me to stand. Clara felt something warm and unexpected bloom in her chest. You could have abandoned me 12 times, let Dalton have the land, divorced me and walked away. Never crossed my mind. Why not? Harlan was quiet for a long moment. Because somewhere between the courthouse steps and tonight, you stopped being the wife I was forced to marry. You became the partner I chose to keep. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't romantic. But it was real, and it mattered more than all the flowery words Clara had ever read in novels. The fight's not over, she said. Dalton will appeal. The syndicate might still sue. We've got months of legal battles ahead. Then we'll fight them together. Harlan extended his hand. Clara took it. And for the first time since their wedding day, the touch didn't feel like obligation. It felt like possibility. The counterattack came at dawn, 5 days after Thorne's ruling. Clara was feeding chickens when she heard the wagon. Not one wagon, 6. Rolling up the ranch road with deliberate slowness, carrying families, furniture, and fear. Harlan emerged from the barn, his hand instinctively moving to his gun belt. What the hell? The first wagon stopped 50 feet from the house. A man climbed down, Frank Morrison, a homesteader from the eastern section of the county. His face was haggard, his clothes dusty from travel. Cross, I need to talk to you. You're on my land uninvited, Morrison. Start talking fast. Morrison gestured to the wagons behind him. We got nowhere else to go. Bank foreclosed on all of us yesterday. Said our loans were called in due to county financial instability. Clara felt ice settle in her stomach. How many families? 18. More coming. Wilson's calling in every loan he can find. Says the water authority proposal threatens the bank's assets, so they're protecting their investments. Morrison's voice cracked. We got 3 days to vacate. Winter's 6 weeks out. We got children, Cross. Elderly folks. Where are we supposed to go? Harlan's jaw tightened. This is Dalton's doing. Punishing anyone who might support the water authority. Probably, but knowing it doesn't change the fact that we're homeless. Morrison looked at Clara. Ma'am, you started this fight. You got any idea how to finish it? The weight of 18 families pressed down on Clara's shoulders. She'd wanted justice, wanted to expose corruption. But she hadn't fully calculated the human cost of fighting powerful men who controlled credit, commerce, and survival itself. Let me think, she said. "We don't have time for thinking," a woman called from another wagon. "We got babies who need shelter." Clara's mind raced through options. The ranch couldn't house 18 families. They barely had supplies for themselves. Winter was coming, and resources were already stretched thin. But turning away desperate people wasn't an option either. "You can stay," Harlan said suddenly. Everyone turned to stare at him. "What?" Sam's voice carried shock. "They can stay. Temporarily. We got the old bunkhouse, the winter shelter, the barn loft. It's not comfortable, but it's shelter." Harlan looked at Morrison. "You and your people work for room and board. We got fences to mend, cattle to move, winter prep that needs doing. You pull your weight, you stay until we figure this out." Clara wanted to kiss him. Instead, she nodded. "Agreed. But we do this organized. Every family registers. Every able person works. And we document everything for when the territorial governor reviews this mess." Over the next 3 hours, they transformed Cross Ranch into a refugee camp. Families claimed spaces in outbuildings. Women organized cooking rotations. Men started reinforcing structures for winter. Children ran between wagons, confused but adaptable the way children were. And Clara took names, documenting each foreclosure with the precision of a court clerk building a case. By noon, Sheriff Porter arrived looking grim. "Cross, you're harboring squatters. I got orders to remove them." "They're not squatters," Harlan said. "They're hired hands, all legal and proper. You can't afford to hire 18 families. I'm paying them in shelter and food. That's a legitimate employment arrangement." Porter's frustration showed. "Harlan, don't make this harder than it has to be. Dalton's got the law on his side this time. These people owe the bank money. The bank has the right to foreclose." "Does the bank have the right to call in loans early without cause?" Clara asked. "Because territorial banking regulations require 30-day notice and documented financial necessity. These families were given 3 days and no explanation beyond county instability." Porter looked at her with something between respect and exhaustion. "Ma'am, you're technically correct. But you're also making enemies faster than you can count them." "I stopped counting at the wedding," Clara said. "After a certain point, it doesn't matter anymore." After Porter left with a warning about obstructing legal proceedings, Clara found Morrison helping repair a corral fence.
"Mr. Morrison, I need to know something. Did anyone else stand up to Dalton? Support the Water Authority proposal?"
Morrison hammered a nail before answering. 3 ranchers spoke in favor at the meeting. 2 storekeepers said it sounded fair. And old Doc Matthews said, maybe it was time Red Hollow tried something different than letting the same men run everything.
What happened to them?
Doc lost his contract to provide medical services to the county employees. The storekeepers got visited by the fire marshal, who suddenly found code violations. And the ranchers? Morrison's expression darkened. They're the ones whose loans got called in first. Clara felt fury burn through her exhaustion. Dalton was systematically destroying anyone who opposed him, using every lever of power at his disposal. "We need to fight back," she said. "How? He controls the sheriff, the judge, the bank. We're just farmers trying to survive." "Your voters and territorial law says the governor can remove corrupt officials if enough residents petition for it." Clara's mind was already working through the strategy. "We get every family Dalton's hurt to sign a petition. We document every illegal foreclosure, every retaliatory action. We make this so big the territorial government can't ignore it." Morrison studied her. "You really think that'll work?" "I think doing nothing guarantees failure. Fighting back at least gives us a chance." That night, Clara worked by lamplight, drafting a petition while families settled in the makeshift quarters around the ranch. She could hear children crying, women trying to soothe them, men talking in low, angry voices about the injustice of losing everything. Harlan found her at midnight, still writing. "You should sleep."
I should finish this. Clara rubbed her eyes. Every hour we delay is another hour Dalton consolidates his position.
You're not going to win this by exhaustion.
I'm not going to win this by resting either. But she set down the pen. How are the families settling? Scared, angry. Some are already talking about leaving the territory entirely. Harlan sat across from her. Clara, you need to understand something. Even if we win, some of these people won't get their land back. The damage is already done. Then we make sure Dalton pays for the damage. Revenge won't rebuild their homes. No, but justice might prevent him from destroying more. Clara met his eyes. What would you have me do, Harlan? Tell them I'm sorry, but they're on their own? I'd have you recognize that you're one woman fighting a system designed to crush people like you. And maybe, just maybe, you can't save everyone. The words stung because they were true. Clara had been operating on pure determination, believing that truth and documentation could overcome entrenched power. But looking at 18 displaced families, she understood the limits of even the most righteous fight.
I have to try,
she said quietly. I know. That's why I'm standing with you. Harlan reached across the table and took her hand. But we're doing this smart. No more public confrontations. No more giving Dalton targets to hit. We go through proper channels, build an airtight case, and make sure when we move, it's final. The touch of his hand steadied something in Clara that had been spiraling.
When did you become the cautious one?
When I realized my wife has a gift for starting fires she can't always control.
That's not fair.
It's completely fair. You're brilliant and brave and absolutely terrible at picking battles you can win. But his voice was gentle. So I'm going to help you win this one properly. Over the next week, they worked systematically. Clara interviewed every displaced family, documenting their foreclosures with legal precision. Harlan used his connections with other ranchers to gather information about Dalton's business dealings. Sam rode to neighboring counties, looking for patterns of similar corruption. And slowly, a picture emerged that was bigger and uglier than anyone had imagined. Dalton hadn't just tried to steal water rights. He'd been running a scheme for years, manipulating land values, calling in loans on properties he wanted, then selling them to corporate interests at inflated prices. The Water Authority was just the latest and most ambitious attempt. He's been doing this since at least 1885, Clara said, showing Harlan a timeline she'd constructed. Small farms mostly, people without resources to fight back. He'd manufacture a crisis, offer a solution that benefited him, then squeeze out anyone who resisted. How many families? At least 40 that I can document. Probably more, who left the territory rather than fight. Harlan stared at the timeline, his expression hard. We're not just fighting for water rights anymore. No, we're fighting to dismantle a criminal enterprise that's been operating in plain sight for a decade. The revelation changed everything. This wasn't a local dispute. It was systemic fraud that crossed county lines and implicated multiple officials. Clara wrote to Augustus Thorne, laying out the expanded case. She sent copies to the Territorial Attorney General and the Governor's office. And she prepared for the war she knew was coming. It arrived sooner than expected. 3 days after sending the letters, Martha Henshaw appeared at the ranch. She looked diminished somehow, smaller, older, stripped of the cruel confidence Clara remembered. Mrs. Cross, I need to speak with you. Clara met her at the property line.
What do you want, Mrs. Henshaw?
My husband's been arrested. Federal marshals came yesterday. They're saying he's part of Dalton's scheme.
Martha's voice shook.
He's not a bad man. He
did what he was told. What Dalton told him to do. That doesn't make him innocent. I know. But I have 3 children, Mrs. Cross. If Wilson goes to prison, we lose everything. The house, the savings, everything. Clara felt the familiar pull of sympathy, warring with justice. Martha had been cruel to her for years, had participated in the social machinery that made Red Hollow so toxic. But her children hadn't done anything wrong. What do you want from me? Mercy. If you testify that Wilson was coerced, that he didn't understand what he was doing, he understood perfectly. He helped forge documents and manipulate families into foreclosure. Then what am I supposed to do? Martha's composure cracked. Watch my children suffer because their father made mistakes? You're supposed to tell the truth. Cooperate with the investigation. Give them evidence against Dalton in exchange for leniency for your husband. Clara's voice softened slightly.
That's the only mercy available, Mrs. Henshaw. And honestly, it's more than you gave me when you called me dried up in front of half the town.
Martha flinched.
I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for all of it. Apologies don't rebuild trust. Actions do. Help us finish this, and maybe your husband avoids the worst of what he deserves.
After Martha left, Clara felt the weight of becoming judge and jury over people's lives. She'd wanted justice, but justice was messier than she'd imagined. It meant deciding who deserved second chances and who didn't. It meant watching families suffer for the sins of men who'd believed power made them untouchable. You did the right thing, Harlan said, appearing beside her.
Did I? Her children will pay the price either way.
Wilson made choices. Martha made choices. You're just making sure those choices have consequences. He paused. That's not cruelty, Clara. That's accountability. A week later, Augustus Thorne returned with 4 federal marshals and enough legal authority to tear Red Hollow apart. The courthouse meeting was standing room only. Every displaced family attended, every rancher who'd been threatened or manipulated, every person who'd ever wondered if fighting back was worth the cost. Thorne stood at the front with documents stacked 3 feet high. After extensive investigation, we have concluded that Mayor Thomas Dalton and Bank Chairman Edgar Wilson engaged in a systematic pattern of fraud, extortion, and conspiracy to commit theft of land and water rights. His voice carried absolute authority. Warrants have been issued for their arrest. All foreclosures initiated in the past 6 months are suspended pending review, and the territorial governor has appointed an interim administration to oversee Red Hollow until free elections can be held. Dalton sat in the front row, his face purple with rage. This is persecution.
Political prosecution of honest men who forged signatures on legal documents, Thorne interrupted. Who manipulated lending practices to steal land, who threatened witnesses and destroyed evidence. He held up a document. We have testimony from 14 sources, including your own bank employees. You're done, Dalton. The marshals moved forward. Dalton stood, his hand moving toward his coat. For one terrible moment, Clara thought he might actually pull a gun in a crowded courthouse. Then he just deflated. All the bluster and power draining away, leaving a bitter old man who'd finally been caught. You think this changes anything? He said to Clara as the marshals let him past. You think one victory makes you important?
No, Clara said quietly. But it makes me free. And that's more than you'll ever be again.
After Dalton and Wilson were taken into custody, the courthouse erupted in chaos. Some people cheered. Others wept with relief. The displaced families surrounded Clara, thanking her, touching her hands like she was some kind of savior. But Clara felt only exhaustion. The fight was won, but the cost had been enormous. Families displaced, lives disrupted, a community torn apart by the corruption of its leaders. Harlan found her outside, leaning against the hitching post. "You all right?"
I don't know.
Clara looked at the courthouse, where her life had been traded like livestock 2 months ago.
Is this what winning feels like? Because it doesn't feel the way I expected.
What did you expect?
Relief, I suppose. Vindication? Instead, I just feel tired.
Harlan stood beside her, not touching but close. That's because you're not built for victory celebrations. You're built for fixing what's broken. And fixing things is exhausting work.
What if I can't fix everything? What if the water authority fails? Or the new administration is just as corrupt? Or...
Then you'll fight again.
Because that's who you are.
He finally took her hand. But Clara, you don't have to fight alone anymore. You've got partners now. People who believe in what you're doing. She looked at him. This man who'd been forced to marry her, who'd had every reason to resent her, who instead had chosen to stand beside her through hell itself.
Harlan, when did this stop being a transaction for you?
He was quiet for a long moment. Probably the day you faced down Dalton on the courthouse steps. You were terrified. I could see it in your eyes. But you did it anyway. That's when I realized you weren't just smart or brave. You were someone worth fighting for.
I'm not special. I'm just stubborn.
You're both. And somewhere along the way you stopped being the wife I was forced to take and became the woman I can't imagine living without. Clara's breath caught. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't romance from novels. But it was real and raw, and more meaningful than any flowery declaration.
I don't know how to be a real wife, she admitted. All I know is legal work and fighting corruption.
Then we'll figure it out together, same way we figured out everything else. For the first time since the wedding, Clara let herself imagine a future that wasn't just survival. A partnership built on respect and shared purpose. Maybe even love. Though that word still felt too big, too frightening to speak aloud.
We still have work to do, she said. The water authority needs to be established. The displaced families need their land back. Red Hollow needs legitimate leadership.
Tomorrow, Harlan said. Tonight, we're going home. We're going to have dinner, and we're going to rest. Because the fight's not over, but this battle is won. As they rode back to Cross Ranch through the gathering dusk, Clara felt something shift inside her. The rigid determination that had carried her through months of struggle softened into something more sustainable. Not surrender, but acceptance that she didn't have to carry everything alone. At the ranch, the displaced families had prepared a celebration dinner. Nothing fancy, beans and cornbread and whatever game the men had hunted, but offered with genuine gratitude. Frank Morrison raised a tin cup. To Mrs. Cross, who fought when the rest of us wanted to run. Clara felt her throat tighten.
I didn't do this alone.
No, but you started it, and that's what mattered. Later, after the families had settled for the night, Clara and Harlan sat on the porch under stars that looked close enough to touch.
What happens now?
Clara asked. Now we build something better. A water authority that actually serves people. A county government that doesn't steal. A community where being smart and female isn't a liability.
That's a lot to build.
Good thing we've got time. Harlan looked at her. And each other. Clara leaned against him, letting herself accept comfort for the first time in longer than she could remember. The fight wasn't over. There would be more battles, more challenges, more moments when victory seemed impossible. But tonight, in this moment, She'd won something more important than justice. She'd won the right to be exactly who she was, and found a partner who valued that person. Red Hollow had tried to break her by forcing her into a marriage she didn't want. Instead, they'd created something neither corruption nor cruelty could destroy. Winter arrived early that year, bringing snow and a crisis nobody anticipated. 2 weeks after Dalton's arrest, the spring that fed the entire valley began to fail. Not dry up completely, but slow to a trickle that made men nervous and cattle restless. Sam discovered it first, riding in at dawn with his face grim. "Boss, we got a problem. The Whitmore Spring is running at maybe 20% capacity."
Clara felt her stomach drop. "That's impossible. That spring has run strong for 40 years.
"Well, it's not running strong now." Sam looked between her and Harlan. "If it keeps dropping, we won't have enough water for the stock, let alone the whole county." Harlan was already reaching for his coat. "Show me." They rode out together, the three of them, through snow that was already 6 inches deep. When they reached the spring, Clara saw immediately that Sam wasn't exaggerating. Water that should have been flowing steady was barely seeping through the rocks. "Could be a blockage upstream," Harlan said, examining the flow. "Or cave-in underground. These limestone formations shift sometimes." Clara knelt beside the spring, her mind racing through possibilities. Or sabotage? Both men looked at her. Think about it. Dalton's in custody, but his allies aren't. If someone blocked this spring deliberately, it would destroy the water authority before it even starts.
Prove that Clara Cross can't manage what she promised."
"That's a hell of an accusation," Sam said. "It's also exactly the kind of move desperate men make when they're losing power." Clara stood, brushing snow from her skirt. "We need to trace the spring to its source, find out if this is natural or manufactured." The search took 3 days of brutal work in freezing conditions. They followed the underground water flow through rock formations and frozen ground, mapping every inch of the system. And on the 3rd day, Clara found it. Someone had deliberately collapsed a section of the limestone channel, diverting water away from the main spring. It was expert work, done by someone who understood hydrology and wanted it to look natural. "Who in Red Hollow knows this kind of engineering?" Harlan asked, staring at the collapsed section. Clara's mind went back through conversations, documents, everything she'd learned about the town. Then it clicked. Daniel Pritchard. He worked for the railroad before settling here. Did survey work for water routes and mine drainage. Pritchard's one of Dalton's poker buddies, Sam confirmed. Could have been bribed or threatened into doing this. Or convinced it was patriotic to stop the woman destroying their town, Clara added bitterly. Either way, we need to fix it fast. The county meeting about the water authority is in 5 days. If we can't show water flowing, the whole proposal collapses. They worked around the clock. Harlan brought in every available hand. The displaced families contributed labor. Even some of the skeptical ranchers sent men once word spread about the sabotage. But restoring the channel was brutal work. They had to excavate frozen ground, shore up collapsed limestone, and redirect flow without causing further damage, all while snow kept falling and temperatures dropped below 0. On the 2nd day, Clara was hauling rocks when her foot slipped on ice. She fell hard, her ankle twisting beneath her with a crack that made her vision white out. Harlan was beside her instantly. "Don't move." "I'm fine." But when she tried to stand, pain shot through her legs so intense she nearly vomited. "You're not fine. That's broken, or damn close." He lifted her carefully, carrying her back to the wagon while she bit back screams. Doc Matthews, the same doctor who'd lost his county contract for supporting the water authority, examined her ankle in the ranch kitchen. "Severe sprain, possibly hairline fracture. You need to stay off it for at least 2 weeks." "I don't have 2 weeks. The meeting is in 3 days. "Then you'll go to that meeting on crutches, because if you walk on this now,
you'll do permanent damage." Doc's voice was firm. "You fought too hard to cripple yourself out of stubbornness." After he left, Clara sat at the table fighting tears of frustration. Everything was falling apart. The spring still wasn't flowing properly.
She was injured, and in 3 days she had to stand before the entire county and prove the water authority could work. Harlan found her there at midnight, paperwork spread around her and her ankle propped on a chair.
"You should be resting." "I should be working. We're running out of time." "Clara," he sat across from her, "you can't do everything yourself." "I have to. This was my proposal, my promise. If it fails, then it fails. But you'll still be alive, and we'll figure out something else." He reached across and closed the ledger she was writing in. "You've spent 2 months proving you're the smartest, toughest woman in this county. You don't have to prove it again by breaking yourself." "What if I can't deliver what I promised? What if the spring doesn't recover in time?" "Then we tell the truth, that someone sabotaged it, and we're fixing it. That building something good takes time." Harlan's voice was steady. "The people who matter already believe in you.
The ones who don't never will, no matter what you do." Clara wanted to argue, but exhaustion and pain made it impossible.
"I'm scared, Harlan. Not of Dalton or his allies. I'm scared of letting down all those families who trusted me."
They don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be honest and keep fighting. And you're already doing both. The words settled something in Clara's chest. She'd been so focused on winning, on proving herself, that she'd forgotten why she started fighting in the first place. Not for glory or vindication, but because people deserved fair treatment and honest leadership.
"How did you get so wise?" she asked.
"Married a woman who taught me the difference between being strong and being stubborn." Harlan stood and extended his hand. "Now come on, you're going to bed before you pass out on your paperwork." He helped her upstairs, and for the first time since the wedding, the separate rooms felt wrong somehow. But neither of them said anything, and Clara fell asleep, trying not to think about how her life had become complicated in ways she'd never anticipated. By the morning of the county meeting, the spring was flowing at 60% capacity. Not perfect, but enough to prove the system could work. The sabotage channel had been repaired, shored up with new stonework that would last decades. Clara dressed carefully in her navy dress, the one she'd worn to expose Dalton, and practiced walking with crutches until she could manage without falling. The courthouse was packed beyond capacity. Every rancher, every displaced family, every person with a stake in Red Hollow's water future crammed into the space. The interim administrator appointed by the governor, a serious woman named Margaret Fletcher, called the meeting to order. "We're here to vote on the proposed county water authority," Fletcher announced. "Mrs. Cross, you have the floor." Clara made her way to the front on crutches, feeling every eye on her. The whispers started immediately.
"She's injured, can barely walk. How's she going to manage a water authority if she can't manage herself?"
Clara reached the podium and set the crutches aside, gripping the wooden edge for balance. 3 weeks ago, someone sabotaged the Whitmore Spring, she said without preamble. They collapsed a limestone channel in an attempt to make the water authority fail before it started. They wanted to prove that a woman couldn't manage what she promised. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "But we found the sabotage. We repaired it. And the spring is now flowing at 60% capacity, improving daily." Clara's voice strengthened. "This is what the water authority will be about. Not perfection, but resilience. Not one person controlling everything, but a community working together to solve problems." She pulled out the proposal document. "The authority will be governed by a board of 7 members, 3 ranchers, 2 farmers, 1 town representative, and 1 at-large member elected by popular vote. No single person controls access. No political favoritism. No backroom deals. "And who controls the board?" someone shouted from the back. "Nobody controls it. That's the point. Every decision requires majority vote. Every meeting is public. Every financial transaction is recorded and audited quarterly." Clara met the skeptical faces head-on. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to trust a system with accountability built into every level." A rancher stood up. "Mrs. Cross, what happens when the next drought comes? Who decides who gets water and who doesn't?" "The board follows the allocation plan based on documented need and historical usage. Livestock get priority over lawns. The central use gets priority over luxury. And everyone, including Cross Ranch, follows the same rules."
You'd give up control of your own spring?
I never wanted control. I wanted to prevent it from being stolen and exploited. Clara gripped the podium tighter. "My father taught me that real power isn't holding resources. It's creating systems fair enough that you'd be willing to live under them, even if you weren't in charge." The courthouse went quiet. Then Frank Morrison stood. "I vote yes. Mrs. Cross fought for us when we had nothing. I trust her to keep fighting." Another voice. "I vote yes. We need something different than what failed us." One by one, people stood. Not everyone. Some of Dalton's old allies kept their seats, faces hard with resentment. But enough stood that the outcome was clear. Margaret Fletcher counted the votes. "Motion passes with 73% approval. Red Hollow County Water Authority is officially established." The room erupted in applause. Clara felt her knees weaken, and Harlan was there instantly, steadying her while she gripped his arm. "You did it," he murmured. "We did it." But the celebration was short-lived. As people filed out, a man Clara didn't recognize approached. He was well-dressed, carrying a leather satchel, with the look of someone used to wielding power. "Mrs. Cross, I'm Robert Thornton, attorney for the Midwest Cattle Syndicate. I need a word." Clara's defenses went up immediately. "The syndicate was part of Dalton's fraud scheme. We have nothing to discuss." "Actually, we do. My clients are prepared to offer substantial compensation in exchange for preferential water access rights." "The answer is no." Thornton smiled like a shark. "You haven't heard the offer yet. $50,000 to the Water Authority Fund, guaranteed employment for 20 local workers, and legal protection against future challenges." It was a fortune. Money that could help the displaced families, rebuild infrastructure, secure the county's future. But Clara saw the trap immediately. And in exchange, the syndicate gets permanent priority access to water, bypassing the allocation system. A reasonable accommodation for significant investment. "It's corruption with a prettier bow." Clara's voice was steel. "We just spent months fighting to prevent exactly this kind of backdoor deal. The answer is no." Thornton's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake, Mrs. Cross. My clients have significant political influence. They can make your life very difficult." "They can try." Clara met his eyes without flinching. "But I didn't survive Dalton to surrender to the next man who thinks money trumps principle." After Thornton left, muttering threats, Clara felt exhaustion crash over her. Every victory seemed to spawn a new battle. Would it ever end? Harlan guided her outside where snow was falling again, soft and clean. "That was either brave or insane," he said. "Probably both, but I meant what I said. We didn't build this to sell it to the highest bidder." "I know. That's why I'm proud of you." Harlan stopped walking. "Clara, I need to tell you something." Something in his tone made her heart race. "What?" "This marriage started as a transaction, a way to save the county and survive the drought. But somewhere between the courthouse steps and now, it became real for me." He turned to face her fully.
You're not just my wife on paper anymore. You're my partner, my equal. And if I'm being honest, the person I think about first thing every morning and last thing at night." Clara felt tears sting her eyes. "Harlan, I'm not asking you to love me. I know that's not something you can force. But I'm asking if you'd consider making this marriage real. Not just legally, but actually." For a long moment, Clara couldn't speak. She'd spent 34 years believing she'd never be chosen, never be wanted for who she actually was. And here was this hard, scarred man offering her exactly that. "I don't know how to be a conventional wife," she finally said. "I'll always care more about justice than cooking. I'll always fight when staying quiet would be easier. I'll drive you crazy with my stubbornness." "I'm counting on it." Harlan's smile was small but genuine. "I don't want conventional, Clara. I want you, exactly as you are." Clara reached up and touched his scarred face. "Then yes, let's make this real." He kissed her then, gentle and careful, like she was something precious that might break. And Clara let herself believe, for the first time in her life, that she was exactly where she belonged. The spring reached full capacity 3 weeks later. The Water Authority Board held its first meeting in January, with Clara serving as one of 3 rancher representatives. The displaced families got their land back after a territorial review invalidated the fraudulent foreclosures. And Red Hollow began the slow work of rebuilding trust and creating systems that served everyone, not just the powerful. But the real transformation happened quietly, in small moments that changed the fabric of the community. The women who'd once mocked Clara started asking her advice on legal matters. The men who'd dismissed her began seeking her opinion on county business. And slowly, grudgingly, Red Hollow learned to value intelligence over appearance, competence over conformity. 6 months after the Water Authority was established, Clara stood before the territorial governor, presenting a model that other counties were already adopting. Her expertise was no longer questioned. Her voice was no longer dismissed. And when people asked how a woman alone had managed to dismantle corruption and transform a county, Clara always corrected them. "I wasn't alone. I had a partner who stood with me when standing was dangerous, and a community that eventually chose fairness over fear." Harlan would always add, "And I had a wife who was too stubborn to quit and too smart to fail." Everything else was just details. Their marriage became the thing neither of them expected, a true partnership built on respect, shared purpose, and the kind of love that grew from choosing each other every day. Not from romance, but from recognition of worth. Clara never became conventional. She kept fighting for justice, kept challenging unfairness, kept being exactly who she'd always been. But now she did it with a community that valued her and a partner who loved her for the very qualities others had once mocked. And Red Hollow, the town that had tried to humiliate her into submission by forcing an unwanted marriage, learned the most important lesson of all. You cannot break someone who knows their own worth. You can only reveal your own corruption in the attempt. The spring kept flowing. The Water Authority kept working. And the woman they'd called an old maid became the person who taught an entire county that dignity was not given by others. It was claimed by refusing to accept anything less than what you deserved. Clara Whitmore Cross had been forced into a marriage meant to control land and manipulate power. Instead, she'd transformed it into a partnership that changed everything, built something fair from the ashes of corruption, and proved that the most dangerous thing in any community is a woman who stops caring what small minds think and starts caring only about what's right. Red Hollow had tried to save itself by sacrificing her. In the end, she saved them by refusing to be sacrificed at all.